David Hargrove wasn't just another face in the small Montana town of Clearwater Falls. He was the kind of man people remembered, a war hero with calm eyes and hands that could fix anything with an engine. David ran a small mechanic shop just off Main Street. Locals trusted him, not only because he was good at what he did, but because he had a quiet honesty about him. He'd often be seen closing up late, wiping grease from his hands while his brand new 1955 Cadillac Coupe DeVille gleamed under the streetlight, the envy of every man in town. He bought that car with the money he'd saved since the war, saying it was his reward for surviving. But no one knew that the same car would later become the center of a mystery that would haunt Clearwater Falls for generations. The night David disappeared, the weather had turned colder than usual for October. The air carried the kind of chill that hinted at early snow. Around 10 p.m., he was seen leaving the Timberline Tavern, where he'd stopped for his usual drink, bourbon neat. Witnesses said he looked troubled that night, glancing over his shoulder as if someone had followed him in. The bartender, a man named Roy Milton, told police later that David had received a folded piece of paper from an unknown man before leaving, a man no one could identify. Moments later, the Cadillac's engine roared to life, echoing down the empty road that led toward the Old Forest and Glacier Lake. That was the last sound anyone ever heard from David Hargrove. When morning came, his wife Eleanor reported him missing. The sheriff's men searched the woods, the roads, and even the old quarry, but there was no sign of David or his car. Days turned into weeks, and the case went cold. Some said David ran away with another woman. Others whispered that he had debts or enemies from the war. But for the older folks of Clearwater Falls, there was always something darker beneath the surface. They swore that on cold nights, when the lake mist rolled over the valley, you could still hear the faint hum of an old Cadillac engine idling somewhere deep below the water, waiting to be found. It was a hot July afternoon in 2025 when a team of divers from the University of Montana arrived at Glacier Lake. They weren't there to hunt for ghosts or legends, just to run sonar scans for an environmental project studying water pollution. The lake itself was a strange place, unnaturally still, framed by dark pine trees that swallowed sound. Locals called it the Drowned Valley because before the dam was built in the late 1950s, that entire area had been farmland and dirt roads. Beneath the water lay the remains of old barns, fences, and rumors. Rumors that the missing Hargrove boy and his Cadillac might be down there too. But to most, that was nothing more than a campfire tale. That changed when one of the divers' sonar readings showed a massive metallic shape resting deep on the lake bed. At first, they thought it was an old tractor or construction equipment left behind before the valley flooded. But when they looked closer at the outline, they saw the distinctive, curved body of a car, something elegant with fins and long lines. The divers decided to investigate, descending into the cold, murky water where sunlight barely reached. The lake swallowed them whole, their flashlights slicing through a world of drifting silt and silence. Then, one diver's light caught chrome, a gleam that didn't belong there. The shape came into view, a car lying perfectly upright, tires half buried in mud. As they brushed away the sediment, the words Cadillac Coupe DeVille shimmered faintly on the trunk. One of the divers, realizing what they'd just found, muttered through his breathing gear, "You've got to be kidding me, it's him." When the car was pulled to the surface 2 days later, a crowd gathered along the shore, reporters, locals, and even a few people who remembered David from their childhood. The once brilliant blue paint had dulled to a ghostly silver, the chrome edges corroded but still proud. As the crane lifted the Cadillac out of the lake, water poured from the windows in thick streams, like the car itself was crying. The windshield cracked under pressure, revealing the driver's seat, and there he was, a skeleton still buckled in, head tilted toward the window, as if he'd been staring at something before the crash. His hands were locked tight around the steering wheel. Someone gasped. Someone screamed. But the sheriff standing nearest to the car didn't say a word, because in the faint sunlight, he could see something resting on the dashboard that shouldn't have been there, a small, folded note, still perfectly dry. Once the Cadillac was secured at the county impound lot, investigators began the painstaking process of documenting every inch of the vehicle. Despite spending nearly 7 decades underwater, much of it had been eerily preserved. The driver's seat, though decayed, still held fragments of clothing fibers, and in the breast pocket, a leather wallet. Inside were David Hargrove's driver's license, 2 faded photographs of his wife and son, and an old gas receipt dated October 16, 1955, the night he vanished. But what truly sent chills through the team was what they found on the passenger seat, a note folded into a perfect square. Somehow, it was dry, the paper stiff as though untouched by water. When they unfolded it under the sterile light of the evidence lab, 4 words stared back at them in black ink. "They're watching from the ridge." That single sentence changed the tone of the entire investigation. The local sheriff, Mark Colton, who was leading the new inquiry, ordered all files on the original 1955 case reopened. They discovered that a report from that year, one filed by David himself, had mysteriously gone missing from the archives. According to old rumors, David had been planning to meet someone at the lake that night, someone connected to a smuggling ring operating out of the lumber mill. The ridge mentioned in the note referred to a cliffside area overlooking the lake, known among locals for its strange lights and unmarked vehicles seen late at night back in the day. Sheriff Colton couldn't shake the feeling that the note wasn't just a warning, but a dying message. Someone had been out there, watching. When the coroner examined the remains, another strange discovery emerged. The cause of death wasn't consistent with drowning. David's skull showed signs of blunt force trauma. That meant he'd been attacked before his car ever entered the water. The Cadillac's ignition was still in the on position, but there was no sign of braking, no shattered glass suggesting a struggle inside. It was as if someone else had driven the car into the lake, using his body to stage an accident. What terrified investigators most, though, was what they found beneath the note on the passenger's seat. A faint, greasy handprint. Too small to be David's, too defined to be random, and under ultraviolet light, a single partial fingerprint glowed with a residue that shouldn't exist after 70 years. As if someone had touched it recently. The discovery of David's Cadillac had done more than stir curiosity. It cracked open a vault of memories the town had tried to bury for 70 years. Old-timers who had long stopped talking began to whisper again in diners and back porches. Reporters flooded Clearwater Falls, desperate to find someone who knew David personally. That's when Harold Briggs, a retired deputy, now 93 and living in a care home outside Helena, reached out to the sheriff's office. His voice shook over the phone, but his words carried a weight that silenced the room. "I know what happened to him." Sheriff Colton and his team drove out the next morning to record Briggs' testimony. The old man's hands trembled as he clutched a faded photograph of himself and David outside the lumber mill in 1955. "He didn't run off," Briggs whispered. "I found something he wasn't supposed to see." According to Briggs, the night David vanished, he'd been on his way to deliver a report. A statement about suspicious activity near the ridge by Glacier Valley. David had seen something while closing his shop late one evening. Two uniformed officers meeting a stranger beside an unmarked truck. The stranger was loading crates that emitted a faint, pulsating glow, like fire trapped in glass, as Briggs described it. The next morning, David came into the station, visibly shaken, and demanded to file a report. But before he could finish, the sheriff at that time, Sheriff Walter Kane, pulled Briggs aside and told him to burn the paperwork. Kane said the matter was handled. That same night, David disappeared. Briggs admitted he stayed silent out of fear. He was young, new to the force, and Kane was a man no one dared to cross. But as years passed, Briggs could never forget the sound he heard echoing from the ridge that night. The growl of David's Cadillac engine, followed by a splash. What made Briggs' confession even more haunting was a detail few had known. The lake didn't exist in 1955. The Glacier Dam wasn't completed until 2 years later, in 1957. That meant when David's car went missing, the valley was still dry land. Someone had driven the Cadillac into that low basin, knowing it would soon be flooded, sealing it beneath water forever. When this fact surfaced, old newspaper archives suddenly disappeared from the local library, and an anonymous caller warned Sheriff Colton to leave the past alone. But by then, the sheriff couldn't, because satellite scans of the ridge area revealed something that hadn't been there before: a new, faint heat signature. A small, isolated cabin built deep in the woods and still occupied. The Cadillac sat behind a locked fence at the Clearwater County impound lot, a relic from another time, its chrome bones gleaming faintly under floodlights. Locals gathered outside the chain link barrier at night just to glimpse it, whispering about the ghost of David Hargrove. But it wasn't just locals who came. A team from the state forensics lab had arrived to run further analysis on the car's surface, looking for any trace of DNA or fingerprints. What they found that night deepened the mystery far beyond anything they expected. Beneath layers of rust on the trunk were two perfectly preserved handprints, one large, one small, pressed into the metal like they'd been burned there. The smaller print didn't match David's wife, his son, or anyone in the database. And when the technicians tested the residue, it came back with an anomaly. No identifiable organic compound, just trace minerals found deep in the soil near the ridge, the same ridge mentioned in David's note. Sheriff Colton decided to keep the prints secret from the media while his team investigated the cabin that appeared on the thermal scans. When they reached the site, they found the place half collapsed and long abandoned. Dust covered everything except for a table in the center of the room, where a single, freshly burned candle still flickered beside an old photograph. The picture showed David standing next to two men in sheriff's uniforms, both unidentified, their faces half shadowed. Someone had circled one of the men's faces in red ink and scrawled beneath it, "Hey, never stop watching." On the floor near the table was a set of wet footprints leading out the back door. Barefoot, small, and recent. The deputies followed them for nearly 50 yards before they vanished near the edge of the ridge. That night, back at the impound lot, the security alarms went off around 2:47 a.m. When officers arrived, the gate was still locked, but the floodlights were flickering. The Cadillac's hood was open, though no one had keys, and the interior lights glowed faintly, despite the car having no power source. The driver's seat was empty. The skeleton that had been carefully removed and stored for forensic study had somehow reappeared inside the car, slumped forward, hands gripping the wheel once more, and across the inside of the windshield, written in the same black ink from the note found in 1955, were 3 new words: fresh, wet, and unmistakably recent. STLYT. Whoa. By the time the sun rose over Clearwater Falls, the Cadillac was gone. The impound lot's cameras had glitched at exactly 300 a.m., leaving a blank screen for 6 full minutes. When the footage returned, the car and the remains had vanished without a trace. No tire marks, no footprints, no signs of forced entry. Just the faint smell of gasoline in the air and a single drop of water on the concrete, rippling as if something had just surfaced and disappeared again. In the weeks that followed, Sheriff Colton resigned without explanation. He stopped answering calls, packed his things, and moved out of town. Some say he started drinking heavily. Others claim he was seen standing near the ridge one night, staring down at the lake, whispering to himself. Not long after, the Lake Patrol reported strange lights glowing beneath the surface again, slow, moving, pulsing, just like the fire trapped in glass David had once described. And on certain nights, when the fog hangs low and the moon hits the water just right, fishermen swear they can still see it, the faint shimmer of a blue Cadillac drifting silently just below the surface, headlights flickering on and off like eyes that never closed. They say the dead don't watch, but in Clearwater Falls, they never stop.
If you liked this video, don't forget to hit that like button, share it with your friends, and drop your thoughts in the comments below. Most importantly, subscribe and hit the bell icon so the next secret finds you first.